A central aspect of Black feminism is activism. There can be no Black feminism without our activists and our social movements. So the idea of social movements, we think about Black Lives Matter, it's about campaigning on the streets, having placards, being known and seen. These are very powerful movements, but yet they are quite masculine movements. And by that I mean it is the clamour, the noise, the demand for change on the streets. And what in Black feminism we find is that a lot of the activism isn't loud and it is very quiet, and I call it the quiet riot. The quiet riot is the campaign for education that Black mothers and Muslim and migrant mothers have sustained over the years. The campaign so that their children can lead a better life. That kind of aspiration, that idea of social mobility. So the Black parents movement is part of this quiet riot. The parents, yes, they did campaign on the streets, and they have left a legacy of that campaigning. But they developed Black supplementary schools, and all migrant communities, Greek communities, Muslim communities, they all developed their own schools outside of the white British mainstream schools because, particularly for Caribbean and African communities, their children were being seen as being excluded, being seen as educationally subnormal, as I mentioned before, being put in pupil referral units, and the racism means that they needed a sense of identity and protection. So setting up these alternative schools outside the schooling system, on Saturdays in church halls or in people's houses or wherever the people could find spaces, speaks to the Black and migrant and Muslim experiences that are out, that we don't hear of in the mainstream schools. In fact, it's like holds a mirror up to what's missing. If schools are formed in the white patriarchal idea of values and of what the curriculum should look like, these schools are evolving, if you like, spaces of safety, spaces of the Black, where Blackness is valued as seen as normal, or as, whatever culture you're from, the language that you speak, the food that you eat, all of that is in those schools, and in the kind of loving care of people giving up their time from your community, usually women on weekends. They might be nurses all day working on COVID wards, and on weekends they're there educating their children. And we've seen this throughout the whole of the COVID experience, where mothers, largely mothers, the research is showing this, have been homeschooling their kids and taking the bulk of the housework as well. So this quiet riot is to actually build capacity in our communities, working from the inside of our communities to build strength and knowledge, and Black knowledge, and the local knowledges that we have. In Black feminism, we call it other ways of knowing. We seek to have those other ways of knowing. And I know that the white establishment do find this other ways of knowing very difficult, and I know that there's been a lot of controversy around Muslim schools and what should be taught and what shouldn't be taught. And I know it's an absolute issue for negotiation, because I don't agree with necessarily the sexism or the homophobia of some of the demands, but nevertheless, these schools are statements, and these disputes, or whatever you might call them, speak to different worlds and other ways of knowing that are competing within the British landscape now. The other forms of activism that I think need to be valorised and celebrated is the work of Southall Black Sisters. Southall Black Sisters, for example, have been campaigning for the rights of women, immigration rights, protecting women from violence within their families and communities, and by the state as well. There's a very famous case that they spearheaded for Karanjit Ahluwalia, and Karanjit Ahluwalia was sentenced to life in prison for murdering her violent husband, and Southall Black Sisters fought on the issue of provocation to release her, and got an outcome. And they are just a wonderful organisation, pro bono lawyers, and all women of colour, and they work under that umbrella of Black feminists. They are Asian, they are Black, from Caribbean and African backgrounds. They are from a whole rainbow of different cultures and backgrounds. So again, that idea of solidarity, very much from the post-colonial times, where we were all just seen as outsiders, and people of colour come under the umbrella of Black. I know that that definition has changed, and very much we are now more, you're Asian, you are from Caribbean or African descent, you are Latinx, and there is this idea of more segregation. So many of us still campaign under the umbrella Black, because it is strength in numbers. We're still a small communities in Britain. There's only 14% of the population are Black and minority ethnic, and that's again another term that we need to deconstruct, because we're all so different, different communities, different religions, and different cultural backgrounds and different languages, but we're all othered in British society. So other campaigns that have evolved in our activism are around police injustices. So there is not only the campaigns by mothers for justice for their sons. We think about Black Lives Matter, which really much focused on Black men's lives, and that were cruelly and illegally murdered by the police. George Floyd, amongst many, many others. And then there is also the campaign SayHerName, which evolved after the death of Breonna Taylor in the USA, and in the wake of Black Lives Matter, what Kimberly Crenshaw and the Black Feminists in the USA have campaigned to say that women have also been murdered by the police. And there is, here in Britain, the death of Sarah Reid, for example. And have we heard of Sarah Reid? We must say her name, because she was a young woman and she had mental health issues. She was beaten so badly in a police custody room, and then she was sent to prison, and she died in prison. They wouldn't give her the medical treatment that she needed. So, we have those injustices here just as much as in the USA. But activism is absolutely essential, because we've seen so many deaths. There's been Cynthia Jarrett, amongst many others, which triggered off many riots. So we had the Tottenham riots after the death of Cynthia Jarrett. Also the shooting of Cherry Gross triggered off the 1985 Brixton riots. So we also are campaigning around the injustices that happen through a racist policing system. But I do want to end on a very positive note. There is always a sense in which those of us who have achieved a certain degree of influence in our jobs, like I'm a professor now, and I always make sure that I mentor my students of colour. I'm here speaking to you. I think we should get our ideas across and throughout society. And I've developed this Black Feminist survival kit in order for us to think through how we can navigate the system, a bit like the young Black women I talked about. And the survival kit is like, find yourself a mentor, somebody who knows the system and will look after your interests. That is absolutely essential. I know that I have many white allies and white feminist allies, and they've been good to me, and they might be overworked, and they pass some of their work down to me, and then I learn from that and develop new skills. So having mentors opens doors. Number two, you have to find your niche. And by that I mean find what is your passion, exactly what turns you on. And I always think whatever we choose to do is never by accident. So I'm looking at identity largely because I came as a migrant young woman to Britain, and I had the experiences I did of being marginalized and not listened to and not believed. And I'm also mixed race, so I'm interested in questions of identity, and that's why I do the sociology that I do. And then building networks is absolutely crucial, because actually the male patriarchy, white male patriarchy, works through networks. Look at the cabinet. We need to network in our own communities and support each other, because it's only by knowing how things work that we can navigate the system. And then at the end, what's really important is be brave, be courageous, and never give up. And I leave you with a message from the wonderful Maya Angelou, and she says this. She says, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. Thank you for listening to me.